Welcome everyone. Thank you very much for attending this session. I am super pleased for us to be there today because we are launching one of its kind initiative. This is a sectoral commitment for biodiversity that we call Transport4Nature. And I will tell you more about this, or actually not me, but my super panelists will tell you more about this in a few moments. My name is Agnes Alosri. I work for the Infrastructure Ecology Network Europe, which is an association located in France officially since June this year, but we've actually been involved in the project for 3 years now. And what we've built with Transport4Nature is a way for the businesses to commit for voluntary measures for biodiversity as part as the global movement towards enhancing biodiversity conservation and mitigating the impact of business on biodiversity. And to do that, we are really in the wake of our spiritual mother initiative, which is Act4Nature. And so I have the pleasure to have Claire Tutenit here, who is the managing director of EPE, Entreprise pour l'Environnement, who initiated the Act4Nature movement a few years ago now. With us, we also have online Anders Jöland, who is the president of IENE and who will tell you more about the whole thinking behind the Transport4Nature initiative. Then we'll have two companies testifying from their willingness to commit and also showing us the first step they have undertaken to do so. So we have Eiffage, a French company, who will be represented by their CEO in a video that you will see online. And Joachim Lemery is here today with us to discuss more in detail and answer your questions. So that's for Eiffage. And for REN Portugal, similarly, we have the CEO who will make an intervention, and we have Mr. Francisco Parada, who is online and who will be able to discuss with us also as a panelist. So we likely have international audience in the room, but also online. And so for people online, don't hesitate to send your questions through the chat in writing, and they will be brought to us in the session. And of course, for the audience in person, you will have an opportunity to take the floor as well. So yeah, without further ado, I will let Anders speak to you and introduce you IENE in general, and specifically how Transport4Nature came to mind, I would say. And Anders doesn't, well, his webcam is broken, so with your indulgence, we'll have Anders and a moose from Sweden to represent himself.
Can you hear him?
Okay, it seems it's not working right now. So we may have to come back to that later, so that's okay. We'll do it in the reverse order. I wanted then to ask Claire to talk about Act4Nature. So it's okay. We have our spiritual mother to... Sorry, you're my... No, but as an initiative to talk first, and then we'll say why it's specifically Transport4Nature for IENE. So please, Claire.
Thank you very much. Very impressive. I would say Act4Nature is a product of a group of angels, and some of them were business angels even. But it is actually a 4-year story now, which started under the chairmanship of Nathalie de Wilder, one of you now, who has a question as a chair for the Commission Biodiversity. How can we scale up all these good actions we all do in small places in our companies? How can we scale this up? And it started from this thinking and this question, and we brought Act4Nature. I will be brief on these 4 years, but Act4Nature was built as a response to this with 4 principles that are really founding principles for the initiative. The first one is that in order to scale up, you need the CEO to be personally interested and accountable and committed. And if the CEO is committed, then he does not need to give orders to everybody, but then everybody will feel allowed to do some things. And since biodiversity is so local, it is extremely important to have this blessing from the top for initiatives to be free to go bottom up. So this alliance of top-down and bottom-up is really at the core of the initiative. The second one was really to encourage mainstreaming, and the Act4Nature builds along 10 common commitments. The CEO has to sign 10 common commitments, and when you look at them, it means that virtually all decisions in the company have to have thought about biodiversity. So yes, it is in the strategy, it is in partnership, it is in the finance when possible, it is mitigation hierarchy, it has to become offset, it is in research and development, it is in HR, people have to be trained, it is in lobbying, you have specific things that discussion with public authorities have to embark this. It does not say that it is a primary goal of every decision, but every decision has to embark it and have thought about it. And the last one is very important, it is reporting, commitment to report. The third point is company-specific commitments. Everybody knows biodiversity has a big problem because there is no universal indicator. You don't know how to measure. When you start measuring, you have billions of data because it is every small place is a lot of data already. Now you want DNA, environmental DNA. How can you make so a company? The commitments. A company adds commitments that are specific to it and that are actually relevant, additional, time bound, so it's smart commitments. And these smart commitments are actually made along indicators that the company chooses and finds relevant and appropriate. So it needs some sort of materiality judgment, but it is actually doable in the company and understandable in the company without a lot of studies. And the fourth point is that these specific commitments have to be validated by a steering committee, which is this group of angels, which are very diverse angels. You have business networks, such as EP. EP is a French partner of WBCSD, for those who know WBCSD, which probably is many here. So it's business networks, but it is also NGOs, it is scientific bodies, we have the museum, we have the French correspondent of IPBS, and so on, and it is the public authorities. So these four groups of stakeholders, 2 or 3 of each, have a judgment as to whether these commitments that a company makes are smart or not. And it is debated. I can tell you it is heavily debated. And yes, it should be. It is not ambitious enough to be relevant. It is not. Is it additional? So everything is discussed and watched carefully. And then there is this collective judgment as to are these commitments smart? And once the judgment is made, the company the CEO can sign, and then have to report later on implementation. So these are the fundamental principles according to which 65 companies committed in 2018. We will disclose tomorrow the result of the 2018-2020 implementation period. So the first report about implementation will go out, and if you are there, I invite you. It's 2 p.m. tomorrow. You will see that it is real action, and we are extremely happy to see this initiative now swarm into other places. We have an Act for Nature Portugal, and now we are extremely proud that the sector, network sector, transport of everything sector, is making this sectorial initiative, because you are both part of the problem. We know the problem of barriers that infrastructure sometimes are, but also a big part of the solution in this management of vast amounts of linear infrastructures that you manage. So we are extremely proud to see this. I wish you good luck, and I hope many of the members of the network will be committed soon, and we will really watch for the development of the initiative. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Claire. And well, we really relied on your guidance in the first year of building up Transport4Nature, so it will be really great to keep you by our side, and we'll also look forward to hear the results of Act for Nature and this first period. It will bear also lessons for us. So I don't know whether Anders is now able to speak. Seems still not. So Europe connection is still not good. That's fine.
Where are the networks?
Actually, so you covered many points that I wanted to discuss anyway, but maybe one of my questions could be the role of expertise. So you talked about the steering committee and how diverse organizations, be them with a scientific background, expert technical background, or civil society background, interact and foster the commitments by the companies. So I maybe have 2 questions on that. The first one is whether you think that having this sectoral approach could help. Like, what was your experience with the diversity of companies from Act for Nature and the reviewing of commitments, since they could come from different sectors? And the second one is whether you've seen some specific roles, like where the scientific technical community waiting for expecting companies more on the M of the smart or of the S, and same for civil society.
It's a very good question. I think it's extremely interesting to have a sectorial approach, because what we have in Act for Nature is we have, of course, we have some taking from company to company, but not that much. And so with a sectorial initiative, you are going maybe to launch joint studies. and to launch joint studies to see how species cross your networks, or what is the efficiency of this or that methodology. And so I think it is a real force to have one more development beyond the commitment in progressing tools, in progressing collective expertise, and you need the scientific background, not background, but backup and support. And so they will see, and it will actually, seeing your commitments, I am sure the scientists in your steering committee, I'm sure there are some, will have ideas and bring studies and bring progress. So it is probably being sectorial, more positive, will encourage a lot of progress in the methodologies to foster biodiversity along your lines.
Okay, well, thank you. That's encouraging. And so we already know that we have a scientific and expert committee who are 20 members who are involved in IENE and kind of overseeing all our activities from the scientific point of view. And actually, all of them want to be involved somehow in Transport4Nature. So that's really good. And they can also specialize because this panel is diverse. There are people from different transportation types, different European regions. So that, well, we hope to be as comprehensive as possible and also to build on a larger network with other expertise networks, NGOs and so on. So.
And maybe to respond your second question as to the roles of NGOs and so on, the NGOs are there and they are very demanding and they push upwards. So they will always demand that it should be more ambitious. They are not in the steering committee to judge about ambition, but at least you can. In the beginning, in 2018, some of the commitments were smart, and we had also accepted some less smart commitments. And a number of companies have started to re-engage. Having done their first 2 years, they have put new commitments. Now all commitments are smart because the NGOs are very demanding. So it is, they have a specific role. The scientists, we mentioned this role about the rigor, about the precision of what's done. What are you meaning here? And then the business networks are here to go and get companies. Mm-hmm. Yes, please, you should come. This is interesting, and so that's the meeting of these various points of view, which is making. You will discover this when the steering group, your steering group, will operate. That this is really one of the rare places where they actually talk together, not fight, but talk. Sometimes disagree, and we had some dissensus. But sometimes very passionate, but they go to a positive outcome. Everybody wants a positive outcome, so it's a good, it's stimulating.
Well, thank you. That's also encouraging, and maybe this makes me think I should signal this, and I will remind you later, but actually tomorrow at this very place, we have a technical workshop at 11 a.m., and this is already, you could think like of a pre-configuration of our future steering committee. So we want people who are interested to be in the initiative, to be in the steering committee, to have a first chance to meet and to see how we can concretely build that. So what type of commitments is realistic for companies, what would be the expectations from people and so on. Anders, hello, you're not a moose anymore.
Hello, sorry for the problem. Technical problems.
I
have to leave, so you will excuse me. Sorry, Anders.
So I think I can't hear him. Can you hear Anders?
Hello.
You can hear him. Okay, then it's only me. Go ahead, Anders. Sorry.
Do you expect me to make my presentation, or?
Maybe. So can we show the presentation? Sorry. Okay. So we will have a presentation, right? Sorry, it's coming. Okay, so we're waiting a bit more for Anders. Yeah, we should. Oui, oui, les slides, il est. Yeah, so. Yeah, so Anders, the presentation is coming. So you will,
Okay.
yeah, the slides are showing. Sorry, very sorry. I could not hear you in the first place, hence the awkward silence, and I'm very sorry for it. But yeah,
No.
so.
Okay, it's me that should apologize. There's some problem with the technical.
No worries. So there's a great guy who does the technical stuff, and so you just have to ask for the next slides when you need to go. So I think we can go to slide 3 now.
Okay. So I start my presentation now. Sorry for the problems and the delay. It's a long way from Sweden to southern France, I think. Anyway, I'm Anders Sjölund, and I'm representing Infrastructure and Ecology Network Europe, IENE. IENE was established 1996 to support knowledge development and implementation of it in the practical activities, with focus on transport, the transport sector, of course. And we aimed to get information to decision makers, to planners, to designers, and to constructors, and also maintenance people. As you can see, IENE is an independent and interdisciplinary network for the exchange of knowledge within this area, ecology and transportation. Sorry, a bit stressed over these technical problems. And as you can see, we have members that span all over the globe, but focus is on Europe, of course. Next slide. Today we have developed cooperation with other similar networks all over the globe and in other continents. And we have also broadened our scope, not only to roads and railways, but also to all kind of linear infrastructure like waterways, power lines, and so on. Next slide. We can take the next slide, yes. IENE have developed, of course, since 1996, and this is the last strategy that we have stated, which recognize the impact of infrastructure development and biodiversity and ecosystems, of course. We mobilize resources to prevent detrimental impact on biodiversity and ecosystems. We try to enforce a mitigation hierarchy in the infrastructure development. And we try to identify opportunities and risks associated with existing infrastructure, which is perhaps the most and the biggest problem in Europe, where we have a very extended network already. Next slide. This is an example of activities that we are involved in. As I said, we exchange knowledge and we are networking, and we do that with conferences, webinars, workshops, and seminars, and so on, all over the world, I almost say, but mostly in Europe, and we have also an international conferences, of course. We foster research. We come back to that later on, but we have an IENE award, and we have established a scientific and expert committee that will support research. And of course, we make a lot of guidance, literature, and so on. We have a practical handbook. I come back to that also. And we also are involved in different projects, specific projects, for example, in the Carpathian and in Romania and so on. So we are working on all arenas, so to say. Next slide. When it comes to networking and knowledge experience, our key activity are, of course, our international conferences. That's a success that have improved and have been bigger and bigger during the years. And the next 22 in September, and I can strongly recommend you to go there, because it will be a physical conference, and I'm sure there will be a lot of new knowledge presented that is worked on for many years now. So I can recommend you that, so to say. The next slide. As I said, we are also involved in different projects. One important project that we are involved in at the moment is where we transform our guidebook, our handbook, Wildlife and Traffic, from a print copy hard book to a web-based handbook that will be constantly updated. I think that is something for the future. We are involved in the Bison project, which is a European Union finance project. We have developed a global strategy to support countries to mainstream biodiversity in transport planning and so on. We are involved, as I said, in different projects, more specific local projects. Save Green is focused on Carpathian. And least but not last, or the opposite, last but not least, the Transport4Nature, which is our last project, and it's very important for us to achieve our goals. The aim with this project is to involve organizations, companies, and so on, with commitments within the linear infrastructure to take part in the important work to strengthen biodiversity and to save biodiversity. The next slide. Yes. As I said, we try to involve companies and other organizations involved in transportation to take part in the very important work to save biodiversity and to strengthen biodiversity. And we do that with commitments. We come back to that also a little bit later about so we can continue. Next slide. There are a lot of companies already involved in Act for Nature, and for you it's easy to link to the Transport4Nature, and you can have a role as a models for others. So these companies listed here is very, very important for the success of the Transport4Nature and the project, how it will develop. Next slide. The overall schedule is we start and launch the initiative today and during this conference, and the next half year or so, from September this year to June 2022, we will make commitments with the companies that will be reviewed and by a steering committee, and the result will be launched in September 2022 through a press conference and at the IENE Internet conference in Romania, as I said. Next slide. Well, I'm sorry. I was a little bit stressed because of the technical problem, but I will stress this situation that this figure illustrates, and I hope that you companies join this initiative because it's very wise and very smart when you think about it. If you join this initiative and address the biodiversity problem, you will not only help biodiversity, but you will also automatically contribute to counter the other and many of the other global crises that are currently challenging mankind. And by participating, you aim at the source of these problems, not only on its symptoms. So please, welcome to join our initiative. And thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much, Anders, and I'm very sorry that you had to face these technical issues. We could hear you well, and I think for now we will maybe save the questions for the final discussion, because I think questions more general about the initiatives would also echo the speech that the companies will make now. So if we could launch the video of REN CEO now, that would be the first introduction of the commitments that companies are ready to take. So.
Management system. Here we run 3 different regulated public concessions. We manage the high voltage transmission grid, the high pressure natural gas grid, including the Atlantic NLG Sport, plus the underground natural gas storage. Our third concession is the natural gas distribution in the north of Portugal. We also have 2 small gas and electricity operations in Chile. As well, we are a minority shareholder of the Cahora Bassa Dam in Mozambique. Our commitment goes beyond our operational mission. All our activities are guided by principles of sustainability, meeting demanding and measurable criteria and respecting standards of excellence. We do this without losing sight of the positive impact on the communities and ecosystems where we operate. We are committed to play an active part in the environmental protection by implementing reforestation policies, fostering environmental education, preserving biodiversity, and advocating the rational use of natural resources. 60% of our power lines and pipelines are located in forest areas, and we work closely with government authorities such as the National Forest Authority, the Institute for Nature Conservation, the National Emergency and Civil Protection Authority, as well all the municipalities in the country where power lines and gas pipelines are located. We have been publicly recognized for the relevant work and good results we have in the prevention of forest fires. We are currently responsible for the vegetation management of more than 20,000 hectares of forest areas through the country. REN is at the core of the energy transition, and sustainability is a key pillar of our strategic plan. We want to reduce our emissions by 50% until 2030, compared to 2019, achieving carbon neutrality in 2040. This is 10 years earlier than the goal set by the European Union. We take a much engaged approach to innovation and research, which is why we set up the REN Scientific Award more than 20 years ago. This award aims to recognize the best energy-related masters and PhDs theses supervised at higher education institutions in Portugal. We also fund the REN Share in Biodiversity in partnership with the Foundation for Science and Technology and also with the University of Porto. For REN, joining Act4Nature Portugal reflects the importance of preserving biodiversity, which is one of the main environmental descriptors used to assess the possible impact of our business activities. This is why the company's work in this area is structured along clearly defined lines of action, identifying the impacts of our activity on biodiversity, involving employees, involving suppliers and service providers, assessing risks and adopting measures to minimize impacts and supporting nature conservation initiatives. These are the focal points of the commitments made on Actor4Nature initiative. The Transport4Nature is based on the principles of the international Act4Nature. It labels the commitments of companies in favor of biodiversity by adapting this system to the transport sector for goods, people and energy at European level. REN is committed with these principles that will facilitate the consolidation and enhancement of the company's strategy for managing biodiversity, which goes across all its businesses' activities and will contribute to the safeguarding of biodiversity and ecosystem services.
So on that one, I suggest that now we move to the video from Eiffage and then we can have a collective discussion. So another field of activity, another country, but also some shared issues that we can discuss together.
Bonjour à toutes et à tous. Merci de me donner l'occasion de m'exprimer devant vous par écran interposé à l'occasion de cet événement majeur qu'est le 25e Congrès mondial pour la nature. Je suis ravi de pouvoir représenter le groupe Eiffage, l'un des majors européens du BTP, des services à l'énergie et des concessions. Nous sommes fortement impliqués dans les opérations d'aménagement du territoire et sommes pleinement conscients de l'impact potentiel de nos activités sur les écosystèmes vivants. Au-delà des considérations réglementaires, notre engagement volontaire au service de la préservation de la biodiversité remonte à la fin des années 2000. Nous nous sommes ainsi investis dans la durée, dans de nombreuses initiatives, aux côtés d'associations et de partenaires, notamment dans le cadre de la stratégie nationale de la biodiversité. Nous avons co-créé des formations de haut niveau, telles que le master Bioterre, développé à l'Université de Paris 1, Panthéon-Sorbonne, premier master professionnel français dédié aux problématiques environnementales en lien avec nos métiers. Nous nous sommes engagés en 2018 dans l'initiative Act4Nature, sous l'impulsion de Nicolas Hulot, alors ministre de la Transition écologique, et avons renouvelé cet engagement en 2020 à travers notre participation au dispositif Entreprises engagées pour la nature, Act4Nature France. Enfin, convaincus que la biodiversité ne se construit pas tout seul, nous avons créé et allons lancer ce 9 septembre le challenge étudiant Eiffage, baptisé InnoVivant, afin de faire émerger encore plus d'idées pour une construction en harmonie avec la biodiversité. Ces engagements successifs avec l'État et les parties prenantes de la protection de la biodiversité nous ont permis de consolider au sein d'Eiffage une culture d'entreprise respectueuse du vivant. Notre stratégie opérationnelle pour la biodiversité s'articule autour de 4 piliers visant à rendre les activités du groupe compatibles avec la nature. Premier pilier prioritaire, la séquence éviter, réduire, compenser, destinée à réduire et réparer les fragmentations des milieux naturels occasionnées par les aménagements urbains ou les infrastructures. Deuxième pilier, construire avec le vivant, en préservant l'existant et en apportant de la valeur ajoutée au projet, par exemple en privilégiant la pleine terre dans un objectif de zéro artificialisation nette et en concevant des aménagements favorables à la biodiversité. Troisième pilier, la restauration des écosystèmes, par le développement d'activités vertes déjà existantes dans le groupe, mais qu'il nous faut renforcer, telles que les activités de dépollution et de génie écologique. Quatrième et dernier pilier, la formation et la sensibilisation de tous nos collaborateurs pour une meilleure prise de conscience de notre empreinte sur la biodiversité et sa prise en compte dans nos activités. Je peux vous assurer qu'Eiffage est pleinement mobilisé. Notre stratégie bas carbone et nos plans d'action biodiversité sont deux éléments fondamentaux et complémentaires face aux crises structurelles que constituent le dérèglement climatique et l'érosion de la biodiversité. Nous poursuivons et renforçons nos efforts afin d'accélérer l'émergence d'une économie bas carbone tout en renforçant la préservation du vivant dans toutes nos activités. C'est aussi pourquoi il est essentiel de s'inscrire dans des démarches volontaires et collectives telles que Entreprises engagées pour la nature et bientôt Transport4Nature, aux côtés de nombreux autres acteurs européens. Je vous remercie et vous souhaite un excellent congrès.
So, well, they can't hear me, but I warmly thank Mr. Costa and Mr. De Ruffray for their interventions, and we'll take the benefit of having Joachim and Francisco with us to discuss, and I will probably go straight in the matter, and pardon me my question, but coming then from the non-business sector, the first question that came to mind when you hear companies taking voluntary commitment is, what do you gain as a company when you take such commitments, when you invest in measures to mitigate your impact on biodiversity, because this seems as a cost that you have to bear. So what do you gain in return? I don't know who should start. Maybe I'll take the opportunity to have Joachim next to me, and Francisco, you're next.
Thank you, Agnès, for your question. So when we invest in mitigation measures on ground, we firstly hope for a biodiversity gain. It's not we are not taking into account the benefit, the economical benefit, in fact. Then, if we correctly manage the ecological trajectory during a long term, we can imagine after that a biodiversity net gain. But it's important to keep in mind that we are talking about nature. We are talking about, rebuilding biodiversity or working for conservation measures. It's a big deal. It's it's not easy. It's all about life and living things. So we necessarily need to be humble regarding biodiversity and the mitigation measures. We are like apprentice sorcerers. I don't know the term in English, it's right, but this is like a long-term bet. So we can have a part of failure regarding biodiversity gain, and no, we are not counting economical benefit because we have invest in biodiversity measures. No, it's not the deal.
Thank you. And well, from what I hear, then it's this approach would relate more to ethics and philosophy to some extent than the proper business model. Francisco, what do you think of that?
Good afternoon. I'm not sure if you are listening to me.
Yes, we can. Perfect.
Yes, okay, great, because I had some sound problems during the first intervention. So, first of all, unfortunately, I couldn't manage to be on Marseille. The reason why I make my intervention from an unusual rainy Lisbon. So, for the ones that don't know Lisbon, it's not the common weather on this time of the year. So first of all, I would like to thank the Infrastructure and Ecology Network Europe and l'Association Française d'Entreprises pour l'Environnement for the invitation to join the Transport4Nature initiative and to join this session. Well, for us, it's a key issue, and it's our business model. We are REN, as you probably know, it's as our CEO told before, is the transmission system operator for electricity and natural gas. So we are the enabler of the energy transition in Portugal to our responsibilities to integrate renewable energy. The topic of biodiversity is in our daily priority because, as you know, we have to put in place lots of infrastructures like substations, power lines all over the country, among them in some protected areas. So since the beginning, we look at this topic in a technical perspective, and at the same time, as one of the conditions for us to implement new projects, because without taking into account the proper way about the conservation and mitigation or compensation of biodiversity, we couldn't manage to do our main responsibility in Portugal. So we are not looking at this as another how do you call it, ethical issue only, but it's part of our business. So there are a lot of stakeholders that know very well what we do, and they recognize our efforts in this kind of topic.
Thank you. That's interesting, and sorry, Joachim, I hope I haven't not well summarized what you thought when you said it's about ethics, but it's also an overview. So now, what I would like to know, but this was a bit tackled by Claire, so maybe you can bounce back to what she said when she said you need the CEOs on board, and there is this top-down and bottom-up movement that meets up and makes it a success. So what triggered the change for both your companies? Yeah, maybe Joachim again.
Yes, you're right. It's important to have a very top-level commitment, and I'm proud of my CEO with his allocation. But first of all, I think the first shift or triggers is regulations. And during the last decade, we have many regulations, a lot of new environmental and biodiversity regulation, like in France, the biodiversity law in 2016. And in the past, our Grenelle de l'environnement momentum, it was a great period for regulation and to make stronger regulation in biodiversity subject. So the second shift is our own operational experiences. And concerning Eiffage, like a constructor and an infrastructure asset manager, particularly a real trauma on a last previous project, project A65. It was a motorway, in fact, in France, between Bordeaux and Pau in the southwest of France. And it was the biggest offsetting program in Europe at that time, with 1,500 hectares of for biodiversity compensation. And the legal difficulties we had to face were like an electroshock for our CEO and the top management of the group. And our CEO, previous CEO, demanded we had a biodiversity approach for the company and for our project. And finally, we adopted a strategy, a biodiversity policy, in fact, in 2009. And we were a pioneer company in our economical sector. The third shift is the voluntary commitments, and Eiffage were committed into the Countdown 2010 of IUCN Europe. And just after, we were engaged in the French National Strategy program, in which we adopted 2 successive action plans. And since 2018, we are committed in the X4Nature initiative. And I see a last shift, very important, probably the most important, the social or citizen expectations about ecological issues, biodiversity loss, or how we can change the way of doing business and to manage infrastructure or construction. That's why, for instance, we are going to launch Sonly Student Challenge, like my CEO has explained, to help arise more initiatives, more ideas for a construction sector in harmony with biodiversity. I think there is the 4 pillars, 4 main shift to get to onboarding our employees and to change the way of doing. Yeah.
Thank you. So, Francisco, well, we've discussed this a bit before, so I think this echoes a lot of your experience. Do you want to elaborate on that? Have you experienced the same or something slightly different?
Yeah, well, I think major things are already said. Well, from the beginning, we have more than 20 years working on biodiversity, and since the beginning, we prefer to be leaders by example, doing the things that we need to do, rather than be followers of the promoting of best practices. So, taking into consideration your question, for us, it's the top level and the middle management of the company is very aware of the importance of biodiversity for many reasons. As was told before, we have regulation to comply. We have including in our biodiversity and ESG strategy, the topic is very important. And when we make some issuing of bonds, for example, green bonds, the biodiversity topic is quite important. So for top level and for middle managers and for managers, this is a strong topic. So everybody in the company knows that we have to deal correctly with this topic if we want to continue to do our main responsibilities and main mission. Then we have the other workers from REN, and most of the knowledge that we have from the field comes from them. So we have plenty of people that is working on the company for a long time ago, and they are one of the main observers of what we are doing on biodiversity and what we can do. That's why we have also a citizen science program, and also we have a corporate science program for our workers regarding biodiversity. And of course, we cannot do our new infrastructure without taking into consideration the other stakeholders. That's why, and I'm also very proud from the message from my CEO, we worked a long time ago with the authorities and with the consultants and the NGOs. And well, the last example of the work that we made with all these parties was the publishing of the guidelines for monitoring the impact of power lines on bird life and the assessment of the effectiveness of mitigation measures. So it's a guideline that was published by the Portuguese Nature Conservancy Agency with our support and with the NGOs and our consultants. We both made the guidelines, and now these are the guidelines that all the promoters in Portugal have to comply with when they make new power lines or new substation. Because, as I told before, this is what we call the payment for every step we made since the beginning, is to lead and to promote the new initiatives and to prepare best practices that can be used by us and by the others.
Thank you. I think that's also an inspiring message, and this shows many different triggers to also go a step forward and take voluntary commitments beyond maybe what the regulation inspires in the first place. So we're running a bit late, so I won't take questions now, and I'm very sorry for it. I hope it's not too frustrating, but if there are people who submitted questions online. Actually, we will take them, and I think we can work on addressing them in writing through our communications as IENE. You can also join the workshop tomorrow at 11 a.m. and if there are technical questions or even more background questions, we'll be happy to take them. So I would like to thank very warmly all our speakers on stage and online, and thank you for joining despite the technical difficulties. Also a massive thank you to Kate Newman, Priscilla Yu, and Kitty, who helped us to run this show and have this. So we have Kate and Kitty, Gilles, who did all the technical things, and this could not have happened without you, so thank you everyone. And we'll end up back the line, so Transport4Nature, here we go.
Long life, yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Long life.